She woke up before the alarm rang, as she often did. Mornings were never easy for her. Not because she was lazy or tired, but because every morning reminded her of what her life had become. She lay still for a few seconds, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet sounds of the city waking up outside her small apartment. Cars passed by, someone laughed in the distance, and a dog barked. Life was moving, fast and loud. Even if she felt stuck, she slowly pushed herself up and reached for the wheelchair beside her bed. Her movements were careful, practiced. She had learned to do everything on her own because depending on others often led to disappointment. The accident had happened years ago, but the memory still lived with her every single day. One moment had taken away her ability to walk, and with it, the future she once imagined. Her apartment was small, but neat. Everything was placed in a way that made life easier for her. The shelves were low, the furniture arranged with enough space to move freely. Still, even with all these adjustments, daily tasks required effort and patience. She brushed her teeth, washed her face, and looked at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back looked strong on the outside, but her eyes carried a quiet sadness. She dressed in simple clothes and tied her hair back. There was no reason to dress up. Most days, no one noticed her anyway. People either stared too much or not at all. Both felt the same. She grabbed her bag, locked the door, and carefully made her way down the building ramp. The lift had stopped working weeks ago, and she had already complained about it many times. Nothing changed. Outside, the air was cool. She liked this part of the day. Early mornings were calmer, and people were less rushed. Still, even a short trip outside felt like a challenge. Cracked pavements, parked bikes, and careless drivers made every journey feel like a test. She pushed the wheels with steady hands, trying not to let frustration take over. Her destination was the grocery store a few blocks away. It was close, but close did not always mean easy. Halfway there, her wheelchair hit a broken part of the sidewalk and stopped suddenly. She tried to push forward, but the wheel was stuck. A man walked past her, talking on his phone. He glanced at her and kept going. Another woman avoided eye contact completely. She waited, hoping someone might help. But the street stayed busy and silent at the same time. After a few moments, she managed to free the wheel herself. Her arms hurt, but she said nothing. She had learned that expecting help often led to hurt feelings. Independence had become her shield. It was safer to rely only on herself. At the store, she struggled to reach items placed too high. She bought only what she could grab. Fresh fruits at the top shelf stayed untouched. At the counter, the cashier spoke to her loudly and slowly, as if she could not understand simple words. She smiled politely, paid, and left without correcting him. Explaining herself again and again was exhausting. On her way back, she passed a small park. Children were playing, parents chatting nearby. She stopped for a moment, watching them. There was a time when she dreamed of a different life, a more active one. Those dreams felt distant now, like memories from another person's life. Back home, she put away the groceries and made herself a simple meal. She ate alone at the small table near the window. The food tasted fine, but something always felt missing. Silence filled the room. She turned on the television, not to watch, but just to hear another voice. In the afternoon, she worked on her laptop. Freelance work was the only option that suited her condition. It paid the bills, but barely. Medical expenses and repairs always came first. She often wondered how long she could keep going like this. Still, she refused to feel sorry for herself. Life had taken a lot from her, but she still had her dignity. Later that day, she decided to step outside again to post a letter. The mailbox was near the main road, a place she usually avoided because it was crowded. As she reached the crossing, cars rushed past without slowing down. The signal changed too quickly, leaving her stranded in the middle. A driver honked impatiently. Her heart raced, but she kept moving, focusing on getting across safely. Once on the other side, she felt drained. She parked near the mailbox and took a deep breath. Her hands were shaking slightly. Moments like these reminded her how invisible yet exposed she felt at the same time. Invisible when she needed help, and too visible when people judged her. She posted the letter and turned back. That was when she noticed a man standing nearby with a small child. The child was holding a toy car, making soft engine sounds. The man looked tired, his clothes slightly wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes. He was clearly in a hurry, but he noticed her struggle as she tried to turn her wheelchair around. Their eyes met briefly. She looked away first, already preparing herself for disappointment. She had seen that look before, the look of sympathy mixed with hesitation. People often wanted to help but didn't want the trouble that came with it. She pushed her wheels again. The curb was higher than expected. Her wheelchair wouldn't move. She tried once more, using more strength this time. Still nothing. She felt the familiar sting of frustration rising in her chest. She didn't ask for help. She never did. Asking made her feel weak, and she had worked too hard to feel strong again. Instead, she adjusted her position and tried to find another way around. Behind her, the child tugged at the man's hand and pointed. The man looked again, this time more carefully. He hesitated, glancing at his watch, then at the busy road. He took a slow breath. She felt his presence before she heard his voice. It was calm, not loud, not rushed. Just a simple question asking if she needed a little help. No pity, no drama. For a moment, she didn't answer. Years of disappointment had taught her to be cautious, but something in his tone felt different. Human. Real. She nodded slightly, her voice soft when she finally spoke. He moved closer, explained to his child what he was doing, carefully helped guide her wheelchair down the curb. It took less than a minute, but to her it felt bigger than that. Not because of the act itself, but because of the way he did it without making her feel small. She thanked him quietly. He smiled, not the forced kind, but the tired smile of someone who understood struggle, as he walked away with his child. She watched them for a second longer than necessary. She didn't know why, but something about that small moment stayed with her. She headed home. Her arms tired, her body worn, but her heart a little lighter than it had been that morning. She didn't know it yet, but this brief encounter was only the beginning of a change she never expected. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling once again, she thought about how one simple act had broken through the walls she had built so carefully. She reminded herself not to hope too much. Hope could be dangerous. Still, for the first time in a long while, she fell asleep thinking not about what she had lost, but about the small kindness that reminded her she was still seen. The next morning started like any other. She woke up slowly, feeling the stiffness in her arms from pushing her wheelchair the day before. The city outside was waking up again with its familiar mix of sounds, honking cars, people chatting, and distant construction. She'd learned to find a kind of rhythm in the noise. It didn't matter that life felt heavy. The world kept moving, and so did she. She made her coffee and breakfast, sitting at the same small table by the window. The sunlight slipped through the blinds, touching her face for a few fleeting moments. She watched a few people pass on the street, smiling at dogs, talking on phones, rushing to work. She wondered if they had ever noticed anyone like her. People looked, sometimes, but rarely did they see. She was used to it by now. After eating, she checked her emails and messages. Work was steady, but never enough to feel secure. Bills and appointments filled her mind even as she tried to focus on writing. She typed slowly, stopping when her wrists ached. Life had taught her patience in ways she had never imagined before the accident. She had patience for small tasks, for waiting in line, for dealing with people who didn't know how to interact with someone like her. But inside, there was still a longing she couldn't silence, a longing for connection, for genuine care. Later, she decided to go to the local library. It wasn't far, but she needed to go out. Being outside gave her a sense of freedom that staying at home never could. She packed her bag, locked the door, and maneuvered herself down the ramp. The lift still wasn't working, but she had perfected her technique for getting to the ground floor safely. Every step was a reminder of how strong she had become, even if no one else saw it. The streets were busy that day. Cars and motorcycles swirled around pedestrians, and she navigated carefully. She passed the corner store where the single dad had helped her yesterday. He wasn't there, of course. She didn't expect him to be. The memory of his small act lingered, though, like a quiet comfort she hadn't realized she needed at the library. She parked near the entrance and took a moment to catch her breath. She liked the smell of books, the quiet hum of people reading and typing. She chose a few novels and guides, anything that could make her day feel a little lighter. She checked them out and started heading back, careful not to let the wheels of her chair get stuck on uneven pavement. On her way home, she stopped at a cafe she often passed.
I'll see.
Inside, the smell of coffee and baked goods was warm and welcoming. She ordered a small pastry and a tea. Sitting by the window, she watched people again. Couples walked hand in hand. Friends laughed over shared stories and parents guided children along the sidewalks. She felt both a part of it and separate from it. The distance didn't hurt anymore. She had grown used to it. But sometimes it reminded her of what she had lost. The spontaneity and ease of moving through the world without obstacles. As she sipped her tea, she felt a familiar presence. Looking up, she noticed the single dad from yesterday standing just outside the cafe with his child. He hadn't seen her yet. The child waved a small hand, letting the toy car roll along the pavement. She froze for a moment. Her heart skipped, and she quickly looked down at her cup, unsure why she felt nervous. He noticed her almost immediately. There was no surprise in his expression, just recognition. He waved politely, and she nodded back. He moved a little closer to the door, balancing his child's curiosity with the rush of his errands.
She could
see the exhaustion in his eyes, but there was also something else, a quiet determination that made her pause. She didn't know what she expected from this encounter. Yesterday had been a fleeting moment, a brief interaction. She told herself that people like him were rare, and one act didn't mean anything lasting. Still, she felt a small warmth, like a tiny spark in a place that had long been cold. He opened the cafe door and stepped inside, the child holding his hand tightly. Their eyes met again. He didn't stare, didn't make her feel uncomfortable. He simply smiled gently and went to order something. She returned to her tea, trying to act normal, though her hands were a little shaky. As he waited in line, she noticed how he managed everything at once, paying attention to the child, keeping track of his wallet, responding politely to the barista. There was a calmness in the chaos, a quiet skill that spoke of someone who had learned to handle life's challenges alone. She realized she respected him instantly, though she barely knew him. After he got his order, he glanced around and caught her looking. He nodded slightly, a small acknowledgement. She returned the gesture and smiled faintly. It was brief, but it felt meaningful. No words were exchanged, but something unspoken passed between them, recognition. Perhaps even understanding. She stayed a while longer, finishing her tea, watching the city move around her. When she left, she noticed him again outside the cafe. He was crouched slightly, helping his child navigate a small puddle. The simplicity of the scene struck her. Life could be difficult, messy, and tiring, but it could also hold these quiet, genuine moments of care. The rest of the day was uneventful. Yet she found herself replaying the encounters in her mind. Each detail, each small expression lingered. She realized she had been starved for simple, sincere interactions, not pity, not charity, but real human presence that reminded her she was not invisible. Later, she returned home and started working again. Her fingers moved over the keyboard with focus, but her thoughts drifted to the man and his child. She didn't know why. Perhaps it was the contrast between their struggles and the way he carried them. Perhaps it was the reminder that kindness could exist without strings attached. Evening came, and the apartment grew quiet. She made a simple dinner and ate while looking out the window. The sky turned shades of pink and orange, the city lights flickering on one by one. She thought about her own life, the routines, the challenges, the walls she had built to protect herself. She wondered if those walls could ever be lowered. Even a little. Before going to bed, she prepared her things for the next day. Work, errands, and small tasks filled her schedule. Yet, for the first time in a long while, she felt a subtle shift in her perspective. Maybe help could come from unexpected places. Maybe not everyone would look away. Just maybe she could trust a little again. She went to sleep with the memory of the brief encounters fresh in her mind. It was a small spark, but in the quiet of her apartment, it felt like hope. She didn't know if she would see him again or if it would change anything, but the thought itself was enough to make her feel lighter, even if just a little. It was the beginning of something she hadn't realized she needed a reminder that, even in struggle, there could be moments of connection, simple and human, that made life a little more bearable. The following morning, she woke feeling a little lighter than usual, carrying with her the quiet memory of the man and his child from the day before. She had been surprised by how much that brief interaction lingered in her mind. There was no grand gesture, no dramatic moment, just a simple act of human care. Yet somehow, it had shifted something inside her. Her morning routine was the same, but she moved with slightly more energy, a small hope tucked into the rhythm of her day. She dressed, brushed her teeth, and pushed herself down the ramp. She was heading to a local community center that offered a few recreational activities and workshops she sometimes attended. It was her way of staying connected to the world, even if only a little. The streets were busier than yesterday. Cars honked, and pedestrians hurried past, absorbed in their own lives. She navigated carefully, always aware of the obstacles that could stop her or slow her down. It was a delicate balance between independence and caution. Still, the memory of the man's simple kindness gave her a quiet reassurance. It reminded her that there were still people in the world who would help without expecting anything in return. At the community center, she attended a creative writing class. She enjoyed expressing herself in words, letting her thoughts flow onto paper. Writing had become a kind of therapy for her, a way to make sense of her life and the world around her. Today, however, her mind kept drifting to the encounter with the single dad. She wondered if he had noticed her again, if he was as exhausted as he looked. If life felt as heavy for him as it did for her. After class, she decided to go to the small park near the center. It was quieter during the afternoons, and she liked watching the children play while their parents chatted nearby. She often observed from a distance, feeling both a part of life and separate from it. She knew that her presence was different, visible in ways she could not always control. People either stared or avoided her entirely. Both made her feel isolated. Today, however, she noticed something new. Across the park, she saw the man again with his child. They were playing near a bench, the child laughing as he tried to push a small toy car through the dirt. She felt a mix of surprise and curiosity. He hadn't seen her yet. She watched quietly, noticing how patient he was, guiding the child without rushing, showing care in the smallest gestures. It was clear that his life was demanding, but he carried it with a kind of quiet resilience that she admired. Their eyes met again when he looked up and noticed her. This time he smiled more openly, a warm and gentle expression. She returned the smile, feeling her heart lighten, approached, holding the child's hand, and greeted her politely. There was no awkwardness, no forced conversation, just a simple acknowledgement of each other's presence. Hi, he said softly. It's good to see you again. She nodded, her voice catching slightly. Hi, she replied, trying to sound calm. The child waved, and she waved back. It was a small, ordinary moment, but it felt significant. There was no pressure, no expectation, just a genuine human connection. They walked together to a nearby path, exchanging small talk about the weather and the park. It was casual, light, yet comforting. She noticed that he asked questions that showed he was genuinely interested, not out of obligation but because he wanted to understand. As they walked, she felt a strange sense of ease. She realized how rare it was to meet someone who could interact without pity or judgment. He didn't see her as a burden, saw her as a person. Recognition was refreshing, almost healing in a way she hadn't expected. Over the next few days, they began to cross paths more often. Sometimes it was at the store, other times at the park or the library. Each encounter was small, yet cumulative. He helped her with minor challenges, like pushing her wheelchair over uneven ground or holding the door when it was heavy. He never made it a big deal. There was no expectation, no comment on her dependence. He treated it as normal, as a simple human gesture. These small acts meant more to her than she could explain. They reminded her that life didn't have to be as lonely and difficult as she often felt it was. Slowly, she began to lower the walls she had built around herself. She realized that letting someone help didn't make her weak. It made her human. And she could see that he was human too. Someone who carried burdens of his own, but still found the strength to care for another. One afternoon, she found herself sharing a bench with him in the park while the child played nearby. The conversation was light at first, comments about the weather, the city, and small everyday frustrations, but gradually it shifted. She spoke about her routines, her struggles with independence, and the small victories that came from overcoming everyday obstacles. He listened attentively, nodding and asking gentle questions. It felt like a rare moment of being truly seen and heard. In return, he shared small details about his life as a single parent. He spoke about the challenges of raising a child alone, the exhaustion that came from balancing work and parenting, and the little joys that made it all worthwhile. She listened, not judging, not feeling pity, just recognizing the humanity in his words. She realized that despite their different circumstances, they shared a common experienced life that was demanding. Sometimes unfair, but still worth living. Days turned into weeks, and their interactions became a quiet routine. She began to feel a growing sense of trust. It wasn't a grand romance or an overly dramatic story. It was something subtler and more profound. It was the realization that in a world that often overlooked her, there was someone who genuinely cared. Someone who could see her, not for what she had lost, but for who she was. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, casting a warm glow over the park, they found themselves walking together again. The child played at their feet, chasing a small ball. She noticed how effortlessly he managed both his child and the interaction with her. There was a balance, a rhythm, in the way he moved through life that she admired. She felt a quiet gratitude, not just for the help he gave, for the example he set. She realized that these small, consistent acts of kindness were changing her perspective. She no longer felt completely alone. There was a sense of connection, however modest, that reminded her of the possibility of trust and care in the world. She began to anticipate their encounters, not in a way that made her dependent, but in a way that made her feel alive. As evening fell, she returned home with a lightness in her heart that she hadn't felt in years. She cooked a simple meal, ate quietly, and reflected on the day. The world outside her window moved as always, but inside, she felt a quiet shift. Life had not become easier, but it had become richer. The small gestures, the brief conversations, the shared moments of humanity, they all added up to something meaningful. Before bed, she prepared for the next day, thinking about the little routines that made life bearable. She realized that kindness could come from the most unexpected places, and that trust, once fragile, could grow slowly with care and consistency. She fell asleep with a sense of quiet anticipation. Not for something dramatic or life-changing, but for the simple human connection that had begun to reshape her world. And deep down she knew that this was only the beginning of a journey she had never expected to take. As days turned into weeks, the small moments between them became more frequent and meaningful. Each encounter carried with it a quiet familiarity, a sense of comfort that neither of them had expected. They still didn't speak for hours at a time, but the presence of the other became a calming constant in a world that often felt chaotic. One afternoon, she was at the local market, struggling to reach an item on a high shelf. Her arms ached from the effort, and she felt the familiar frustration bubbling up. She tried again, stretching and pushing her wheelchair closer, but it was no use. Suddenly, she felt a shadow beside her, and a hand gently helping to lift the item into her grasp. It was him, the man she had started to see regularly. He smiled, a quiet reassurance that this was no burden. "Here," he said softly. "Got it for you." She smiled back, grateful but careful not to let the gratitude turn into expectation. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady but warm. It was not the act itself that mattered, but the way he did it without fuss, without judgment, without making her feel small. She realized that it was rare to meet someone who could give help freely. Without expecting anything in return, they moved through the market together, speaking lightly about the items they passed, sharing small observations about people and the city around them. There was a rhythm to it, a quiet understanding that neither had to explain much to the other. The world around them continued its noise, but in those moments, it felt like they were in a small bubble of calm. Later, they walked through the nearby park. The child ran ahead, laughing and chasing a small ball. They followed at their own pace, their conversation growing slightly more personal. She spoke about the difficulties of living alone, the constant adjustments she had to make to navigate a world not built for someone in a wheelchair. He listened attentively, not interrupting, not offering empty sympathy, but acknowledging her struggles with genuine understanding. In return, began to share more about his life as a single parent. He spoke about the long days balancing work and childcare, the exhaustion that seemed to follow him constantly, and the small victories that made it all worthwhile. She listened, feeling a quiet connection forming, a sense that they were both carrying invisible burdens that the other could understand, even without fully experiencing them. One day, she found herself opening up more than usual. They sat on a park bench, watching the child play nearby, and she spoke about her accident, about the moment that had changed her life forever. She described the fear, the anger, the grief, and the long journey toward accepting her new reality. He listened with patience, nodding, never interrupting, never turning away. For the first time in years, she felt like someone truly understood the depth of her experience. In turn, he spoke of his own struggles, of the partner he had lost years ago, of the sudden responsibility of raising a child alone, and the quiet loneliness that came with it. They shared their pain not as a way to seek pity, but as a way to acknowledge that life had not been easy for either of them. In the space between words, a bond grew, built on shared vulnerability and mutual respect. Over time, their trust deepened. She began to let him help with small tasks she had always handled herself. Realizing that accepting help didn't make her weak, it made her human. He, in turn, felt a quiet relief in being able to give without judgment, to care for someone who valued his help without making him feel indispensable. They found a rhythm together, a partnership of sorts. Even without labels or expectations, one afternoon, they faced a challenge together. The wheelchair had a flat tire, leaving her stuck near the park. She had never encountered a problem quite like this alone. She struggled with the wheel, frustration building. Seeing her difficulty, he approached calmly, kneeling beside her to examine the situation. With gentle hands and a patient attitude, he helped fix the problem. The child watched, curious and quiet, learning the value of care and patience by example. That day, she pushed herself forward again. She realized how much she had grown comfortable with his presence. Not dependent, not entitled, but accepting and open. The quiet moments of help, the shared understanding, the mutual respect, they were all small threads, weaving a sense of connection that neither had anticipated. Evenings became a time of reflection. She would sit by her window, watching the city lights flicker on, thinking about the small, consistent acts of kindness that had started to change her perspective. She didn't expect anything dramatic. She didn't want grand gestures or life-altering promises. She simply wanted the acknowledgement that she was seen, that her struggles mattered, and that someone could be present without asking for anything in return. The man had also begun to notice changes within himself. Caring for her in these small ways gave him a sense of purpose beyond his daily responsibilities. He saw that kindness, given freely, could create a ripple that affected not only the person receiving it, but also the giver. Their interactions were not about saving each other. They were about recognizing shared humanity and finding strength in mutual support. As the weeks passed, their connection became a quiet anchor in both their lives. It was not marked by dramatic events or sudden revelations, but by consistency, presence, and empathy. They had begun to see the value of small, genuine gestures, the power of being there for someone without expectation. It was a reminder that life could be hard, but it could also hold moments of unexpected grace. She started to anticipate their encounters, looking forward to the small interactions that had become meaningful. He noticed, too, the subtle shift in their dynamic. There was comfort in knowing that someone understood, someone cared, someone would be there without judgment or obligation. It was a rare and precious thing. One evening after a particularly long day, They sat together on the park bench, the child playing quietly nearby. The air was cool, and the sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and pink. They spoke less, content to share the silence, feeling the connection deepen without words. She realized that this was what she had been missing, the quiet presence of someone who saw her, acknowledged her, and walked beside her through life's small challenges. She returned home that night feeling a sense of calm and gratitude she hadn't experienced in years. Life was still difficult, still demanding, odd, but it held these small moments of connection that reminded her she was not alone. The walls she had built around herself were still there, but they were beginning to shift, allowing space for trust, hope, and the possibility of meaningful human connection. As she prepared for bed, she reflected on how much these small interactions had changed her outlook. It wasn't about the help itself, but about the humanity behind it. It was about being seen, being acknowledged, and finding strength in shared experience. She drifted to sleep with a quiet heart, feeling that something rare and valuable was taking root, a bond built on care, respect, and the understanding that even in life's struggles, there could be moments of grace, patience, and connection. As the days went by, their connection grew stronger. Though it remained gentle and understated, there were no grand declarations or dramatic turns, just the quiet rhythm of shared presence and care. She felt herself trusting him more, allowing small gestures of help without fear or hesitation. He, in turn, valued the subtle bond they had built, appreciating the trust she placed in him without needing words to confirm it. One afternoon, they decided to visit a small garden on the outskirts of the city. The place was quiet and green, a little sanctuary away from the noise and busyness. The child ran ahead, laughing as he chased butterflies while they moved together at a slower pace. She noticed the way he kept glancing at her, attentive to her comfort, making sure she could navigate the gravel paths without difficulty. It was not an overbearing concern, but a natural attentiveness that made her feel safe. They found a bench under a large tree and sat together, watching the child play. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating patterns on the ground that danced with the gentle breeze. She felt a rare sense of peace. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to enjoy the moment without worry about the past or the future. It was a small, perfect fragment of life, and she treasured it. "Do you come here often?" he asked, his voice soft and easy. "Not really," she replied, smiling. "I like quiet places, but I don't get out much." He nodded, understanding. "It's nice to have a place like this. Makes you forget the rest of the world for a little while." They shared more stories that day, not heavy ones, but ones that revealed their character, their pasts, and their perspectives on life. She told him about her hobbies, the books she loved, the dreams she had once held before life had shifted so dramatically. He listened intently, asking questions that showed genuine interest. In response, he shared memories from his own life, small triumphs, and challenges he had faced while raising a child alone. Their conversations became a bridge, connecting to lives shaped by struggles, resilience, and quiet strength. Over time, the child grew comfortable with her presence, often running to her with a small wave or holding out a toy to show her. She smiled each time, realizing how meaningful these simple interactions were. They were small, everyday moments, yet they carried warmth, connection, and a sense of belonging. She found herself looking forward to these encounters, not with expectation, but with appreciation for the human bond forming naturally, one rainy afternoon. As she navigated the streets with an umbrella in one hand and the wheelchair in the other, she found herself stuck in a tricky patch of mud. She struggled to push forward, frustration and fatigue building. Suddenly, a familiar voice called out, and there he was, with the child under a smaller umbrella, running toward her. "Need a hand?" he asked without judgment or hesitation. She smiled, relief washing over her. "Yes, please," she said, feeling grateful in a way that was genuine and uncomplicated. He helped steady the wheelchair, guiding it safely to firmer ground. It took only a few minutes, but it reminded her of the rare gift of reliable kindness. Moments like these, small yet profound, were building her trust and easing the loneliness she had carried for so long as the seasons changed, so did their bond. They continued to meet in parks, libraries, cafes, and markets. Their conversations deepened, touching on hopes, fears, and small dreams they each held close. There was a growing understanding between them, a recognition of shared humanity that did not need dramatic gestures to be felt. It was steady, quiet, and meaningful. She began to notice changes in herself. The walls she had built to protect herself were slowly softening. She allowed herself to accept help without guilt, to speak openly without fear of judgment, and to feel genuine gratitude without hesitation. She realized that vulnerability could coexist with strength, and that allowing others into her life did not diminish her independence. On the contrary, it enriched her experience. Bringing warmth and connection to moments that once felt lonely, he too was affected by their growing bond. Caring for her in these small, consistent ways gave him a sense of purpose beyond his daily responsibilities. He recognized the value of patience, empathy, and consistent support. Learning that the simplest acts could create profound impact, the mutual respect and understanding they shared became a quiet anchor in both their lives. One evening, as the sun set, painting the sky with shades of gold and orange, they found themselves sitting together in the park, watching the child play. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of grass and flowers. She reflected on how far she had come since the first encounter. From a place of isolation and guardedness to one of openness and trust. "Thank you," she said quietly, breaking the comfortable silence. "For what?" he asked, curious. "For being here," she replied. "For the small things, the understanding, the patience. I didn't realize how much it mattered until now." He smiled gently. "It's nothing, really. We all need a little help sometimes. I'm just glad I could be here for you." It was a simple exchange, yet it carried depth and meaning. She realized that life's greatest gifts often came in quiet, unassuming forms: presence, attention, and care. They didn't need to define it, label it, or dramatize it. The bond itself was enough. As the months passed, their lives continued to intertwine in small, meaningful ways. She felt a renewed sense of hope, a quiet optimism that had been absent for many years. The world remained challenging, full of obstacles and unpredictability, but she had found a companion in the journey. Someone who offered support without expectation. Understanding without judgment, she continued to pursue her own independence and work, knowing that help didn't take away her strength, but enhanced it. He continued to balance his responsibilities as a single parent while being present in her life, recognizing that genuine care could be part of everyday life, not just in extraordinary moments. One evening, as she prepared for bed, she reflected on their journey. From a chance encounter to a steady presence in each other's lives, they had created something rare and valuable. It was not a story of grand transformations or dramatic rescues, but of quiet consistency, shared humanity, and mutual respect. She felt a sense of completeness, not because her life was perfect, but because she had found a connection that reminded her she was seen, valued, and understood. As she drifted off to sleep, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. Life had been difficult, and challenges remained, but she knew that even in struggle, moments of genuine care and connection could transform her experience. The man and his child had entered her life unexpectedly. Offering help that went beyond physical assistance, they offered presence, understanding, and the quiet power of human kindness. And in return, she offered her trust, her friendship, and her recognition of their shared humanity in the quiet of her apartment. She realized that hope did not have to be dramatic or loud. It could be simple, consistent, and patient. And as she slept that night, she felt a profound sense of peace, knowing that the smallest acts of care could make the greatest difference. And that even in a world that often overlooked her, she had found someone who truly saw her,